Thank you so much. All right. Oops, my apologies, everyone. I changed the slide too fast. All right, so let's get moving on the crux of today's session. This session is on college, Cégep, and Polytechnic perspectives on institutional RDM planning. Our agenda is that our first speakers will start with a welcome. Next, we will have a set of resource presentations shared with us. And the final piece of our time is dedicated to a panel discussion. I am going to pass the floor to Lee Wilson, who is the Director of Research Data Management for the Alliance. I'm also going to stop sharing. Lee, the floor is yours now.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. As Director of Research Data Management at the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, I'm very privileged to be welcoming you all to today's session. This panel series, which has been hosted by the Alliance and developed with support from the National Training Expert Group and our Research Intelligence Expert Group, started really around a community-identified need for more conversation around the tri-agency's RDM strategy requirement. And it's been an immensely successful series, with each session generating engaging and productive discussion. But from that first session, it became clear that the unique perspectives and challenges faced by colleges, Cégeps, and Polytechnics needed to be included as a part of this conversation, which of course meant that we had a gap in our programming. So we are very thankful to our partners at CICAN for not only bringing this gap forward, but also being instrumental in advancing today's session over the course of only just a few short weeks. We at the Alliance consider this to be a first step among many in our engagement with this important sector, and we look forward to many future partnerships to come. As we're reaching the end of the series, I would like to thank everyone who helped to make this happen. As we all know, series like these take a small village, and so I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of the Alliance staff, the organizing committee members, the network of experts, in particular the National Training Expert Group and the Research Intelligence Expert Group, the community partners and speakers who have graciously given up their time to have these important conversations in a forum that can be recorded and shared out for the benefit of the whole community, and of course our partners at CICAN who helped to make today's session possible. So with that, I'll hand things over to Anna Tonguzo, Director, Government and Stakeholder Partnerships of Colleges and Institutes Canada, for her welcome and an introduction to our panelists.
Thank you, Lee. Hi, everyone. So CICAN is pleased to partner with the Alliance to put on this event, facilitating readiness for Tri-Council requirements and bringing the community together to share knowledge, resources, and experience on institutional research data management. Capacity building for our system is a key priority for CICAN, and we are looking forward to further collaboration with the Alliance to drive this work forward. We are hopeful that today's session will better equip institutional leaders and staff to manage their research data, in particular in the college context, recognizing our unique roles in post-secondary education and the research ecosystem. Je suis également heureuse que nous commencions notre discussion aujourd'hui avec les perspectives de nos principaux partenaires québécois sur les ressources qu'ils ont développées et leurs perspectives sur les stratégies de GDR. Avant de passer au panel, nous entendrons les perspectives et expériences de Sylvain Poirier, directeur adjoint de la recherche à la Fédération des Cégeps, Lynn Lapostole, directrice régionale de l'Association pour la recherche collégiale, et Grégory Hersan, coordonnateur au soutien à la recherche à Synchronex, le réseau des CCTT. Merci à nos collègues d'avoir accepté de partager sur le GDR les ressources qu'ils ont développées et leurs perspectives sur le GDR. Nous allons commencer par Sylvain avant de passer à nos autres collègues. Et Sylvain, vous avez la parole. Merci.
Merci, Anna. Welcome all. I will start the presentation in English. So solely because what I will be presenting at first is the ecosystem of Quebec, since you will be hearing from 3 different organizations in Quebec, so you can better figure out who does what. And I will try to I believe this should do it. Okay, so now you should see a presentation. And so quickly, I will go through the structure of the ecosystem. I have them in English over here. So in this Quebec province, we have 3 types of colleges, which are the public colleges. We have private colleges in 2 types, those that are subsidized and those that are not, but in here they're merged together. And we have governmental institutes, police institute, or one of which over here is the Tourism and Hospitality Institute, which covers the food and hotels and greater tourism issues. And so these are the different types of colleges. In all the public colleges are together, linked together within the Fédération des Cégeps, which I represent today. Then within the colleges, we also have technological access centers, which are known as CCTT in Quebec, but those outside the province may better imagine what is a CCTT by figuring the TAC, the Technological Access Centers, which is a which was greatly influenced by the CCTT model in Quebec. The CCTT model is 35 or 40 years old in this province. We now have 59 different CCTTs, 55 of which are linked to public colleges, so within the Fédération des Cégeps sector of activity. And we also have CCTTs linked to public colleges and one with a government institute. The CCTTs are linked together within the Réseau des CCTT that will be represented and presented today by Grégory Hersan. And Lynn will be presenting the ARC, which is Association for the Collegial Research, and which is an association of members from all areas of research within the province. But I do believe, and Lynn can clarify that, I do believe the ARC also have some members from other provinces of Canada. So within these 3 types of colleges, we also have 3 types of research, which is the applied research, mostly within the CCTTs, but not only. We do have research centers within the public sector or private sector that are not recognized as CCTTs. Some are tax and some are just research centers with no official recognition, but we do have more than 50 of them. And we do have independent researchers as well, which are mostly faculty and staff. And they research in all types and fields, so applied research that can be done with CCTTs or not, fundamental research that can be done in collaboration with universities or not, and pedagogic research, which is a big area of research within the Quebec colleges. So you have the 3 presenters of today. that will establish the actions and how we split the responsibilities and actions in RDM for the Quebec province. Moving on to the next one, I'll move to the English one. So over here, what we will be presenting is our area of concern, if I may, and action within the RDM, different actions that need to be taken. So from now, I will move on to French to present what the Fédération des Cégeps has been working on in the last year or so. Donc, bonjour à toutes et à tous. En ce qui concerne la gestion des données de recherche, on peut voir sur la diapo à l'écran comment se divisent les tâches entre l'Association pour la recherche collégiale, le réseau des CCTT et la Fédération des Cégeps, la fédération qui regroupe les 48 cégeps publics du Québec. Donc, au niveau de la Fédération des Cégeps, nous avons une commission de la recherche donc, qui regroupe un membre de chacun des cégeps et qui permet des échanges et des partages sur différents sujets qui concernent la recherche, notamment la gestion des données de recherche. À l'intérieur de cette commission-là, nous avons établi des groupes de travail et ces groupes de travail ont proposé à l'ensemble de la communauté au printemps dernier un gabarit de stratégie de gestion des données de recherche. Donc, la partie institutionnelle qui doit être mise en place au niveau des collèges. Nous avons travaillé ensemble, les collèges, pour se doter d'un modèle de stratégie qui pourrait être ensuite repris et adapté selon la perspective locale. Et évidemment en fonction des obligations et exigences des trois organismes de recherche fédéraux. Donc, cette stratégie-là, ce gabarit de stratégie-là a été diffusé et les collèges actuellement sont à adapter et finaliser leur stratégie pour déposer dans les différentes instances. Donc, les stratégies devront être approuvées localement dans chacun des collèges, soit au niveau du conseil d'établissement, du conseil d'administration, et puis ceci pour être prêt en mars, tel que demandé par les organismes subventionnaires, devrait se faire tôt en début d'année pour donner la possibilité aux instances de réviser les stratégies, de les approuver et de les diffuser telles que demandées. Donc, cette stratégie-là est une première action qui a été menée au sein de la commission de la recherche de la Fédération des Cégeps. Et une deuxième action qui est portée par la Fédération des Cégeps est une négociation avec, dans ce cas-ci, Borealis, l'ancien Scholar Portal, donc qui vient récemment de changer de nom, mais Borealis qui gère la plateforme Dataverse pour le Canada. Nous avons débuté des démarches dans le but d'avoir une entente fédérative, donc un dépôt qui soit commun à l'ensemble des collèges publics du Québec et qui permettra à chaque collège d'avoir accès pour déposer ces données de recherche à l'intérieur d'une banque qui est Dataverse dans ce cas-ci. Les dépôts de recherche Et les stratégies sont des démarches qui sont volontaires. Donc, chaque collège a le pouvoir de suivre ou pas les recommandations et les propositions qui sont faites au niveau fédératif. Ce que nous souhaitons mettre en place est une uniformisation des pratiques et de doter les collèges d'outils qui leur permettent d'arriver plus rapidement à déposer ce qui peut être exigé du côté des organismes subventionnaires. Donc, le dépôt, la même chose pour le lieu de dépôt. Il sera proposé d'utiliser Borealis, mais un collège ou un CCTT pourrait décider qu'il préfère utiliser un dépôt disciplinaire pour un champ particulier, si la recherche se fait, par exemple, en santé. Donc, je n'irai pas plus loin. Je mentionne que cette présentation sera partagée. À la fin, il y a des coordonnées pour rejoindre chacun des organismes et que je vous invite, si vous avez des questions ou de besoin d'éclaircissement, à communiquer avec moi ou avec les responsables des deux autres organismes selon la teneur de vos questionnements et ça me fera plaisir d'échanger avec vous. Donc, sur ce, je passerai la parole à Lynn Lapostole.
Merci beaucoup, Sylvain. Alors, je vais enchaîner tout de suite en commençant par remercier l'Alliance pour l'organisation de ce webinaire. Vous rappelez, Sylvain l'a présenté brièvement tantôt, que l'ARC, l'Association pour la recherche au collégial, est une communauté d'intérêt dont la mission est de promouvoir la recherche collégiale par des activités de représentation et de valorisation, ainsi que des services à la collectivité auprès de tous les groupes concernés. Et on le fait avec des gens du Québec, mais aussi avec des gens de l'extérieur du Québec, comme Sylvain le laissait entendre tantôt. On a effectivement des membres qui pratiquent la recherche ou qui soutiennent la recherche, qui administrent la recherche dans d'autres collèges, dans d'autres provinces, du Canada. Le premier axe de nos activités est celui des représentations, nous a amené à participer aux consultations qui ont eu lieu sur la gestion des données de recherche. En 2015 et en 2018, nous avons soumis un mémoire dans lequel nous reconnaissions les avantages de la gestion des données de recherche, dans lesquels on soulevait des questions, mais dans lesquels aussi on a insisté sur la nécessité de l'injection de ressources financières pour gérer les données de recherche. Autant des frais directs de recherche que des frais indirects de recherche. Et depuis 2018, dans tous les mémoires qui le justifiaient, nous avons insisté sur la nécessité d'avoir pour les collèges des ressources pour soutenir la gestion des données de recherche, pour gérer les données de recherche. Si je pense à l'axe de nos activités, qui est celui qui est représenté davantage ici sur ce que vous voyez à l'écran, la gestion des données de recherche est nommée précisément dans notre nouveau plan stratégique. On fait déjà des activités, mais on veut renforcer aussi notre capacité à soutenir la collectivité. Et on le fait entre autres excusez-moi, j'entendais un son en même temps, quelqu'un qui parlait, entre autres, par l'entremise d'un groupe de travail sur la gestion des données de recherche. C'est un groupe qui réunit 5 conseillères et conseillers à la recherche de collège, ainsi que la bibliothécaire responsable du Centre de documentation collégiale. Le Centre de documentation collégiale est aussi un autre petit bijou qu'on a dans le réseau collégial au Québec, qui est considéré comme un dépôt institutionnel pour les documents de recherche, pas pour les données de recherche. Et c'est une personne qui connaît très bien, qui participe à des groupes au sein de l'Alliance, Isabelle Laplante, et elle fait partie de notre groupe de travail. Ce groupe de travail a tenu l'an dernier 2 cafés virtuels, un premier d'introduction et un deuxième, 2 cafés, pardon, d'introduction. Je vais mettre, dès que j'aurai terminé de parler, 2 documents que nous avons réalisés dans le cadre de ces cafés virtuels, qui sont vraiment des documents là, pour se familiariser avec la gestion des données. Et le groupe a aussi, ces derniers mois, préparé 2 plans de gestion de données modèles, un en sciences naturelles et génie, l'autre en sciences sociales et humaines. Et ces 2 plans de gestion de données modèles sont des documents qu'on a produits à la suite d'un appel de l'Alliance de recherche numérique du Canada. Et ces 2 modèles sont en train d'être traduits par l'Alliance et ils seront bientôt en ligne en français et en anglais. Vous aurez donc la possibilité d'avoir 2 modèles de plan de gestion de données pour la recherche collégiale, fait à partir vraiment de recherches qui sont réalisées dans des collèges. Ensuite, le groupe de travail a continué ses activités. Sylvain a dit tantôt que la Fédération des Cégeps avait produit un plan de gestion, une stratégie, pardon, institutionnelle modèle. Nous, à l'intérieur du groupe de travail, ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on fait exactement ce qu'il a dit. Il m'a passé la main. Le groupe de travail est en train de s'entraider pour adapter justement ce modèle de sorte que chacun des collèges concernés ait sa propre stratégie selon ses couleurs, selon sa culture. Donc, il y a une entraide au sein des membres du groupe de travail pour préparer ces stratégies. Et ce travail sera suivi bientôt, le 19 décembre, d'un nouveau café virtuel où les membres du groupe de travail vont partager le fruit justement de leurs activités, vont montrer des tables des matières, des différentes stratégies, de sorte qu'on puisse voir comment ça se traduit, comment un modèle ensuite est repris dans un établissement et peut être adapté vraiment, comme Sylvain le disait, à la couleur locale. Et pour ce café virtuel, toutes les parties concernées par l'élaboration de la stratégie ou de la gestion des données sont invitées, c'est-à-dire l'invitation part des conseillères et conseillers à la recherche, mais elle s'étend aussi aux bibliothécaires, archivistes, gens des technologies qui voudraient venir discuter justement de stratégie institutionnelle avec nous. Alors, comme vous le voyez, il y a des liens aussi qui sont faits entre les conseillères et conseillers à la recherche et, par exemple, les bibliothécaires. Isabelle Laplante, dont je vous parlais tantôt, fait le lien avec toutes les bibliothèques de collège du réseau collégial québécois pour être certaine que cette question des gestions de données de recherche sont vraiment prises en considération par toutes les parties prenantes concernées. Sur ce, je laisse la parole à mon collègue Grégory du réseau Synchronex, pardon.
Merci beaucoup, Lynn. Bonjour tout le monde. Ça me fait plaisir d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup à l'Alliance pour l'invitation à partager et à échanger sur la gestion des données de recherche. Donc, comme Sylvain l'a mentionné, je représente donc l'ensemble des CCTT aujourd'hui, donc les 59 CCTT, dont 11 sont en pratique sociale novatrice et le reste de nos CCTT dans des secteurs qui touchent plus aux technologies. Donc, comme la Fédération des Cégeps et l'ARC, on travaille également le dossier de la gestion des données de recherche. Je dirais que nous, en fait, pas la différence, mais ce qu'on essaie, c'est d'être complémentaire avec ce qui est fait au niveau de la Fédération et de l'ARC. Donc, comme il est indiqué sur la diapo, vous pouvez voir à l'écran, on va plus intervenir sur l'opérationnalisation, en fait, des exigences de la politique et sur les aspects légaux. Je vais revenir un petit peu plus loin. Donc, on a la façon dont on fonctionne au réseau, pas juste pour le dossier de la gestion des données de recherche, mais pour l'ensemble de nos dossiers, c'est qu'on a des comités formés par des directeurs de CCTT, donc avec qui on va travailler et développer des outils, faire des recommandations donc, à nos membres, également donc, collaborer avec les différentes instances collégiales, la Fédération des Cégeps, l'ARC, pour justement faciliter la prise en compte en fait, de ces exigences-là. Un des travaux que l'on fait, un peu distinctif par rapport à la Fédé et l'ARC, c'est qu'on travaille actuellement au développement d'un outil de bonne pratique en gestion de données de recherche. Donc, ce que l'on a fait au début du chantier, il y a à peu près 2 ans, on a fait un grand sondage au sein du réseau. Et ce sondage, en fait, visait à identifier les pratiques qui étaient mises en place dans le réseau, dans les différents CCTT, au niveau de la gestion des données de recherche. Donc, on a appris beaucoup de choses, on a été chercher beaucoup d'informations. Donc, il faut savoir qu'au niveau des données dans le réseau, on a des CCTT qui en génèrent énormément de par leur domaine d'activité, puis d'autres beaucoup moins. Donc, c'est très, très hétéroclite au niveau du volume puis du type de données qui est généré. Donc, avec ce sondage en main, on a été capable d'identifier des besoins, des angles morts un petit peu pour se conformer donc, à la nouvelle politique des 3 organismes fédéraux. Et un des livrables que l'on est en train de travailler, c'est ce guide qui va être disponible probablement au début de l'année et qu'on va partager avec l'ensemble du réseau. Donc, nos outils sont partagés dans tout le réseau. Donc, c'est un guide auquel vous pourrez avoir accès, puis qui reprend un peu les spécificités qui sont rencontrées donc, dans certains CCTT. Au niveau des plans de gestion de données de recherche, on ne refait pas les choses que l'ARC a développé. L'ARC a développé, comme Lynn vient de l'expliquer, a travaillé beaucoup sur les plans de gestion. Nous, on s'assure d'offrir des formations à nos membres pour qu'ils soient éveillés à ce qu'est un plan de gestion de données de recherche d'abord, puis ensuite comment le compléter. Donc, ça, c'est vraiment important. Donc, c'est vraiment à ce niveau-là qu'on va intervenir. Au niveau des formations également, on va un petit peu plus loin. Donc, il y a toute la dimension cybersécurité qui est associée, qu'on le veuille ou non, à la gestion des données de recherche. Donc, c'est des éléments aussi que l'on va couvrir donc, dans nos formations. Donc, on va offrir à partir de l'année prochaine 3 ou 4 formations en cybersécurité de différents niveaux, puis qui vont s'adresser à différentes personnes à l'intérieur des centres. Donc, des gens qui vont être plus donc, au niveau des technologies de l'information, les chercheurs également dans leur pratique. Donc, ça va être un outil intéressant. Puis, un élément additionnel que l'on fait aussi, c'est que la plupart de nos CCTT vont travailler en étroite collaboration avec les petites et moyennes entreprises, ce qui amène donc des enjeux légaux associés à justement la gestion des données. Et c'est un élément qu'on va travailler également, donc notamment en intervenant sur, on propose un ensemble de modèles de conventions de recherche à nos membres et on s'est assuré que ces modèles donc, respectent les exigences donc, de la politique. Donc, c'est des éléments qu'on va toujours travailler également. Donc, ça, c'est quelque chose qui est important. Puis, un point de discussion, d'échange, je dirais, qui est un peu plus loin, je pense, dans l'exigence de la politique, c'est les lieux de dépôt de données. Donc, je sais que la Fédération travaille sur cet aspect-là également. Nous, on y réfléchit à l'interne aussi, peut-être pour faire des recommandations, donc voir quels sont les besoins. C'est un problème qui est complexe. Comme je vous le disais, on a des CCTT qui génèrent peu de données, d'autres qui en génèrent des quantités colossales. Le stockage de la donnée coûte très cher. Donc, comment on fait? Est-ce qu'on mutualise? Est-ce qu'il va y avoir des particularités? Bref, on est vraiment dans toute cette réflexion donc, au sein des comités. Donc, pour résumer, le comité fait des recommandations, réfléchit sur différents aspects. On a une collaboration aussi avec nos collègues de la Fédé et de l'ARC sur ces questions-là. Et également, donc, développement d'outils pour faciliter l'appropriation donc, des différents outils et contribuer au déploiement aussi donc, de la stratégie institutionnelle. Merci beaucoup.
We are so grateful to all 3 of you. Thank you, Gregory. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Sylvain. I now want to move on to our panel section. And I am going to introduce our panel moderator, please, Michelle Edwards-Thompson. Today's panel, again, is on college, Cégep, and Polytechnic perspectives on institutional RDM planning. Michelle is chair of the Research Common at Red Deer Polytechnic, where she has worked for 17 years. A librarian by training, she has led the group that worked on the strategy at RDP. Michelle, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and the rest of our panelist session team to take on this topic. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jen. And thank you, merci beaucoup, to all of our colleagues from Quebec for sharing all of your resources. I think that's a perspective that I don't always personally in Alberta get the opportunity to hear, so I really appreciated being able to learn from you as well. We have a number of others who we get to learn from this morning from the college and polytechnic sector. And because context is everything, I'm going to start by having each of them introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about who they are, the institution that they work at, and also if you could just give us a little bit about where your institution is at in terms of development with the strategy and the role that you played in that. Christina, you're in the top corner of my screen, so we're going to start with you.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. So I'm from Canadore College. I'm the director of the research center here, and we have successfully published our strategy. It's now online. We have at Canadore College, we have our 3 campuses located in North Bay, Ontario, and then we have an additional campus in Parry Sound as well. And so we have a full breadth and scope of programming and in research. Although we're a smaller kind of northern college in Ontario, we have a full breadth and scope of different research hubs, from social innovation to advanced manufacturing and prototyping, aviation, to genomics and biotechnology research. So we've published our strategy, and so in the new year we'll be re-meeting as an advisory committee, and I chair that committee right now. And we'll be meeting on developing our work plan and activities to move forward.
It's got to feel good to be at that stage, Christina. Susan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Shepley. I'm from Sheridan. I'm a manager in our library services, where I manage our faculty liaison librarian program and our services in the library to support research, including data services. So I've been involved in these RDM conversations for over 3 years, and part of our RDM advisory group with partners from across the college, in particular working closely with our research office and the director of research there. At Sheridan, we have also published our strategy that went up earlier this fall. And if you take a look at it, and I'll talk about it a little later, you'll notice it's a bit of a hybrid of a strategy and a work plan, where we've set out our priorities for the next 2 years to move into implementation.
Nice. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Thanks, Susan. Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie Walter. I'm a librarian at Langara College. I'm the science librarian, but I've also found myself doing RDM work. That's why I'm here. So Langara College we have a growing applied research center. We have various types of research as well, some genomics, some data analytics, lots of data, and we are located in Vancouver, BC, on the traditional territory of Musqueam people. So I am part of the core, the core RDM team at Langara, the library and the Applied Research Center. So I've been involved throughout, during assessment, planning, writing the strategy. And we are at the stage where we have a draft that we're getting feedback from our stakeholders and working towards getting that approved and finally posted.
So close, Maddie. And I do want to just share as well the wisdom and the community building that this is an opportunity for is huge, but we do also know that the impetus for a lot of this work is because of the Tri-Council strategy. So we do have a representative from the Tri-Council with us as well, in case there are any questions that would best be answered by them. So Hugh, if you could just briefly introduce yourself as well, please.
I'll unmute. Mais tout d'abord, je veux remercier tous nos collègues au Québec pour votre présentation. C'est vraiment primordial, cette manière de partager des informations, puis c'est vraiment important. Puis merci encore, parce que je me souviens que vos trois, c'était actif dans notre consultation, dans notre plan stratégique l'an dernier. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy and Government Relations at the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. Yes, we're the impetus for this strategy. It's been a great privilege to be here. There's lots of very good information sharing, and I'll be here to ask answer questions, and also just to just to underline, this is a strategy. I think we all realize that things will change. It's not as you go forward, you're putting together aspirational things where you want to go. And I think this is just a wonderful information sharing session. So thank you very much, Michelle, and also everybody else. That's it.
Thanks, Hugh. And I will just say to the group online that we do have some questions, and I'll work through those with the panelists, but we also are very, very interested in the questions and the thoughts that you might have. So please pop those into the question and answer, and we'll keep an eye on those as well, and do our best to answer as much as we can to make sure that we are creating as full a conversation as we can. So first of all, I want to just start by asking each of the panelists how you got started on your strategy. What did you do? Who did you involve? And from your perspective, why was it important to begin this effort? Susan, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, thank you. And I realize I forgot to say that Sheridan is located in Ontario, Brampton, Mississauga, and Oakville, and we have a diversity of research activities, many of which we undertake with our industry and community partners. So as I mentioned, our work with RDM really started over 3 years ago, and we began with the impetus knowing that the tri-agency policy was coming, but also really with our eye on the fact that we wanted RDM to be a broader conversation at Sheridan with anyone who was really engaged in research. So we formed an RDM advisory group, and it's composed of members, key kind of stakeholders from across Sheridan. So research, library, IT, records, privacy, and legal, as well as the Research Ethics Board. And we started having those conversations a few years ago, really kind of putting our minds to sort of 4 key areas. So raising awareness around RDM at the college, assessing our institutional readiness, formalizing RDM practices, and developing a roadmap. That's really where we focus things. We knew we wanted to have the time and space to work away on this. So we were working on it before the policy was live, but I can highlight, if you'd like, Michelle, or I can turn it over to the other panelists, some of the key activities that we worked on in the lead up to our writing, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, I think just a couple of those highlights super quickly would be great and useful.
Yeah, so
thanks.
Around raising awareness, very early on, we developed an RDM library guide and tutorial that's available to all researchers in our community. We also developed an RDM communications plan with an internal website with resources around RDM for anyone who is interested in learning more, and regular kind of touch points with our community to let them know the strategy is coming, what to expect, and to raise that awareness. In terms of assessing our institutional readiness, that was an activity we undertook pretty early, and we also did an institutional survey to understand, gain an understanding of how our community was understanding and practicing RDM. So we did that January of 2021. And formalizing our RDM practices in the library side, we started looking at how can we build some capacity to develop our own RDM skills and supports, and started to investigate options around data deposit. So those are some of the things we worked on leading up to the actual writing.
I think that building capacity piece has been huge for all of us. So absolutely. Maddie.
So I think the first step for us at Langara College was trying to bridge the gap between the library and the Applied Research Center, just because we hadn't really had to work together that much before, and this was an area where we both need to be involved. So I think starting that relationship and learning whose responsibilities lie where, that was a really big first step for us. That was it did take a bit longer perhaps than some other institutions, but I think that was a really important thing to do. We also ended up meeting with stakeholders, our IT, Research Ethics Board, institutional research, Indigenous researchers, some of our researchers as well, who potentially had already been doing some RDM. And then also another big part in getting the process going at Langara, I think, was participating in a provincial RDM group for smaller institutions. I think that helped get the momentum going and help troubleshoot some of the issues that we were having. That was a really valuable resource. I would say that perhaps the part that felt the most intimidating during this process was actually starting to do some of the writing for the draft. So I think that the biggest help there was just to go for it and start that process, because it is easier, I found, to start getting people engaged and involved once we had something to go off, some paper to share, or some things written down. So I think that was a really big part in the process, where we just decided to go for that and start getting things written, and it really helped move things along.
Yeah, that's huge. The tyranny of that blank page with the cursor just blinking is intense. So good for you. Christina, can you tell us a little bit about Canador's process?
So the process here has been interesting, to say the least, for me. I started basically as the pandemic started. So to wrap my head around RDM was basically the least of my concerns when I first came on. So I have to admit that, a year into my position is when I became very aware of RDM. And I have some brilliant colleagues in the Ontario college system. So Vicky Mowat and Donna Sevenpiper, who I work with regularly, presented to our heads of applied research group on RDM. And then that's what sparked my interest in it. And so I brought it back to our institution and really started to call on people within our college. So a lot of those that have already been mentioned, but IT, ethics, our library, institutional research, our privacy officer, our First People Center, gathering them all around, even our academic effectiveness and quality management person, bringing them in on the discussion to really discuss at the primary level, what is research data, and getting those, those kinds of very basic definitions out of the way and having honest conversations with each other. And so it's been a year and a half in the undertaking with constant meetings, monthly meetings, I should add. And then as we kind of came into the fall, it was biweekly meetings as we started to outline what are our priorities. And I have also a brilliant colleague here at the college in the First People Center, Carly Renaud, who's leading our Indigenous research data management and bringing that back to our group. And so, we came to that fruition. We have a very unique, perspective here too. We share a research ethics board and library with the university, and it's a small university. And so, trying to share those resources with our university colleagues, trying to bridge some of those conversations, has been challenging, but also really rewarding, to say the least, to have that connection to the library that's so critical for this. So. It's just been a very interesting and I think adventurous and honest conversation as we've moved the course.
I don't think you can do it without some of those honest conversations, but they're interesting is a good word for it, I think. So that's fair. Susan, there is a question in the chat for you. Just curious if you can talk a very little bit about the sections or components of the roadmap you created. So wondering if you can do that.
Sure. So I think probably the easiest thing, and I see this question is from Karen, is we do have a link, and I can share that in the chat and you can really see the structure that we followed, but we did use the template that was provided by the Alliance, or formerly Portage, and that was really hugely helpful as we were setting things out. But we really followed that template, which laid it out really clearly. And then we also identified where we wanted our priorities to be over the next few years. So I think probably the easiest thing is just to take a look at it. And if you have more questions, I can answer them. I don't want to take too much time away from others.
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Susan. And I also see that Alex Thistlewood is putting in some of the Alliance resources as well that you're referring to. So those are in the chat for everybody as well. So you've all mentioned working very intentionally with your applied research arms. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how your institution is integrating applied research, especially with external partners, into the construction of that strategy, because that's something that I think is a little bit more unique to this sector and something that I'm curious to see how you've each approached. Maddie, if you can maybe start.
Sure. So yeah, considering our industry partners has been a really significant part of our strategy development because a significant proportion of our research does involve industry partnerships. And I know that universities also have that, but I think in colleges it can make up a really significant chunk of the research that you do. So a lot of it's been trying to balance and meet the needs of all our stakeholders all at once. This is just an extra set of needs that we have to consider around, the confidentiality, proprietary information, having the contract information when we're negotiating those contracts initially allow us to do what we need to do to comply, but also allow the industry partners to feel like their needs are being considered as well. So we'll have to work in that at some point. I think we put in our strategy that we'd like to identify how to do these things, but we haven't quite gotten there yet, about contract language, non-disclosure agreements, what kind of data actually falls under the scope of this, if it's just some proprietary information that we're using just from that company, but we're not actually generating ourselves. Like what kind of scope are we actually looking at here? And then, having really secure active data storage for some of those confidential types of data, and then maintaining good relationships. Again, I think just coming back to how to negotiate with our industry partners and make sure that all the needs are being met of funders, of research participants, of the industry partners themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that negotiation can be quite tricky. So thank you for that. Christina, can you tell us a little bit about Canador's approach?
Yeah, so it's much the same as Maddie. We're keeping our partners, our industry and community partners at the forefront of the discussion. And but the argument I always have back is that data is data. And so what we do with that data has to have some kind of plan around it. So whether we're generating or receiving the data, there has to be some kind of secure storage for that particular data. And where do we deposit it to if we're allowed to do so, and how do we share it back and forth between the partner? Those are fundamental questions, and so that's always in the back of our minds as we kind of approach this particular strategy and the activities that will ensue now in the next 3 years. So much like Maddie, always in the forefront, but the argument is data, and we need a plan around it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. It still needs to be taken care of, regardless of who's generating it, right? Susan, can you talk a little bit about what Sheridan is doing?
Sure. I think it's very similar to what Maddie and Christina have mentioned, and we recognize that there's going to need to be a lot more conversation about this. So we'll be taking a look at those contracts that we do with our partners to see where all of this kind of ties in, looking at those research agreements, and at least at the metadata level, considering what we'll be able to share. I think that's going to be something really important for us to look at as well. And I think a bit of disentangling the whole question of IP and where the policy fits in, a lot more conversation. And I think we're comfortable knowing we will not have that sorted by March of 2023. And that's okay. It's on the radar. We're going to work through it.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that it doesn't have to be answered. It just needs to be sort of identified as something that you're going to think about. That's, I think, a really smart approach. So something else I kind of want to think about, in the college, Cégep, and Polytechnic sector, institutions are often smaller in size and have fewer resources than larger counterparts. What types of support do you have? How are you dealing with any resource challenges? And moving forward, what kinds of support have you identified or do you think that you will need? Christina, can we start with you this time?
Sure. So yep, we're small. You know, I'm a one woman show here at the Research Center. But it's really about the supports you have around you. I have a very supportive academic leadership team and senior executive team. And so, you know, when I got, you know, I started poking people to be on this advisory committee and provide some, you know, consultation to what we were about to engage on, very supportive, because what it really led to was a discussion on data governance for the college. And how do we start that conversation? Well, let's start here. You know, it's a little backwards, but let's start here at least, right? We also have very supportive partners in the library, and they were very wanting, like they just wanted to engage so badly with the college. And so it was very easy to do that. I will give kudos, and kudos is when it's due, to our heads of applied research group. We have an amazing college sector. It doesn't matter who I pull on, you know, from my colleagues, even from the Cégep system, we've gone to them. So Lynn, you know, Isabel has been a wonderful to kind of connect with, and trying to bring and rein in those supports where you can get them and when you can get them is fantastic.
There's so much that we can do if we actually work together on it, right? Susan.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think we've had some really great partners, and especially working library and research together. I have to give a shout out to Vicki Mowat, our director of research, who's phenomenal. And I think, you know, to your question, Michelle, resourcing is really challenging. And I think we need to recognize that colleges, it does look quite different. You know, I think about the large research universities I've worked at in the past, where I potentially would have had, you know, we would have had a research data management librarian dedicated to this work, potentially a whole team supporting RDM. And that's just not the reality. And certainly at Sheridan, we're very fortunate. We do have a great, pretty large group of librarians compared to some of my other colleagues. However, we're, I think, going to be looking at, it's going to take a while to figure out how we are going to resource this. And I think some of that is just determining what the needs are of our faculty and our researchers, and knowing that might evolve over time. So I mentioned earlier, we are looking at how to build the capacity, and I was able to you know, take a look at some of our resources in the library. We have a phenomenal business and data librarian. We were able to reorient that role, a metadata and systems librarian who works on RDM, and a data team, as I'd mentioned. So those are some of the things, I guess, that I'm thinking about resource-wise from the library perspective. But I imagine, yeah, there's going to be some challenges going forward, but we'll keep chatting.
Yeah, I think it's the start of a conversation, not the end, right?
Exactly.
Maddie, what is it looking like out in BC?
Yeah, so I guess I interpreted this question as like the practical supports, you know, like money and people. So, I mean, at Langara, I've had some release time, but for the most part, it has been something that's just been added on to my existing full-time duties. And I feel like it's the same with my colleague in the applied research. So that is challenging, trying to balance this into a schedule that's already quite full. And I think just the main thing was, I know there's certain times of the year when I'm busy with other things. So I'm trying to fit it in during the times I know I have the most opportunity. And I think that the grants and external funding kind of sources for this have been in my mind, but also the lack of time, just being able to apply for that and track those down has been tricky as well. But I think moving forward, it is quite challenging to know exactly how much support we need, because we haven't done this before, and many colleges haven't done this before as well. So it's a bit difficult to know exactly what we will need. And then I think too, the visibility of the March 1st deadline, I think people don't always realize that a lot of the work really starts after that. So there's a lot of visibility, I would say, of developing the strategy up until March 1st, but then after that, it might just not be quite as noticed, and maybe might be forgotten about. So I do wonder about after that deadline. And I think too that it's difficult to do too much work when you don't have that support yet, because then it kind of demonstrates that you're able to do it without that funding. So it's a bit of a balance to still demonstrate you have the need, but not stretch yourself too thin. And I think this will definitely be a conversation that needs to evolve over time because we're just not quite sure yet.
Absolutely. That's always a very careful line to walk, right? So something else that I know has been something to be tangled with both at the university and at the college level is Indigenous data. And so I'm curious whether each of you can just give me a little bit of a perspective on how your institution is dealing with the Indigenous data management question as a part of this strategy development. And Maddie, we're going to come back to you.
So I think our approach was that we wanted to reach out and give the option to participate when Indigenous researchers wanted to do that, but also not to require anything. I think just letting people participate at the level they would like to, so that you're not over consulting, but you're also still letting people know that you'd like to have their perspective if they want to share it. So I think as well at Langara, we don't have like Indigenous research coordinators or anybody like that. It was mostly we're giving Indigenous researchers the opportunity to respond, whether through our survey that we know that they received, or just sending a few personal invitations, but mostly just leaving it up to individuals to participate if they wanted to and not requiring it. So finding that balance. And we also did, some of us have taken the OCAP course as well, just so we can recognize how we can use these principles to guide and support, but also realizing the uniqueness of every different situation that you're working in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it will look different everywhere and for each group, right? Susan, what is Sheridan doing or thinking around Indigenous data?
So I think this is something we're still really sorting through. We have in our strategy reflected that we're complying with the OCAP principles. We refer to Chapter 9 of the TCPS2, as well as the research office built guidelines for research with Indigenous peoples that I think were published a year or two ago. So we've done some thinking, and those guidelines exist, but I think after March or into the new year, that's where we're really going to be sorting this out and having some more conversation.
Yeah, so again, work that continues after March 1st, 100%. Christina?
So Canadore has really been a big advocate, a big partner with Indigenous communities and peoples and First Nations. And so we've always taken a forefront stance on that work. So we have an established policy and procedures on working with Indigenous communities and nations. And as a result, we wanted it to be a priority within our strategy. And so I mentioned Carly. Carly is leading that front on a number of different levels. At a national level with the First Nations Indigenous Governance Center and respective universities that are working with them, and she sits in on that conversation. We're working with our local partners in the Indigenous communities with that. We also have an Indigenous Research Council that we've established a few years back, and we work actively with them, in liaising on RDM and other research-related items. And so they're informing some of that strategy and the activities that happen afterwards. And we're also working with our northern counterparts in the same respect. And so, I give kudos again to Carly and the team and the First People Center for doing that, because it's really keeping us at the forefront of all of those kinds of consultations, partnerships that are needed in developing RDM.
No, that sounds fantastic. You're lucky to have someone who's partnering with you in that way. Being very conscious of the time, I just want to give you all the chance to have one last word. So if I can ask maybe each of you to think about one piece of advice that you would give to the people watching today who might not be quite as far along in the process as you are. What do you feel like you've learned, or what piece of advice would you have needed to hear earlier in the process to be able to help you move forward? Susan, can you start us off?
Sure. In thinking about this, I think what has been most helpful for me through all of this is knowing that we don't have to have it figured out perfectly right from the get-go. And I appreciate that tri-agency really kind of baked that into the policy, the recognition that every institution has a different context, that these strategies will evolve. That I have found to be a comfort, to be honest. Also, my other piece of advice I would share is to really reach out to your colleagues who are doing this work. There are so many phenomenal people. I know Christina mentioned the heads of applied research in Ontario, College Libraries Ontario. We have a community of practice around RDM. I know many of those folks are on this call today. That's been hugely valuable to know that we're kind of all in this, and we can learn from each other and work together as we do this work. It's been very helpful.
That's incredibly fortunate to have that support and that space just to talk with others who are doing the same thing, right? Christina.
I think the one thing I've learned is just don't be afraid of it. It's, I was a little afraid of it, but literally jumping in, knowing that we have those people around us, as Susan mentioned, and our colleagues, you know, that are going through much the same thing, just not being afraid to jump in with 2 feet to learn exactly what it is and what it's going to, you know, encompass as you move forward. I think that's the best piece of advice I could probably give. And again, like Susan, just reach out. We're all going through it and we can all support one another.
Oh, that's fantastic. Maddie, final thoughts?
My advice is, or my final thoughts are very similar. I guess the big shift that I had during this strategy development process was, okay, you know, it actually doesn't have to be, you know, this amazing strategy or perfect right away. It can just cover the basic stuff and then we can add on to it as we want. So it just took a lot of pressure off thinking that way. And then I really do echo that it's great to find colleagues who are all going through the same thing, and helps troubleshoot and just get you know, find solutions that might have been troubling you before. So I think it's really helpful to find a community to get support and learn from.
Yeah, I think that's huge. We are a community. We're all working together and we're all happy to help each other, right? It doesn't have to be something that you're doing in isolation. Hugh, do you have any advice from the Tri-Council standpoint, having listened to all of this now?
This has been wonderfully beneficial to listen to this, and as each of you are speaking and giving your summary comments, I'm thinking very much the same thing. There's lots of white space ahead, and you don't have to be afraid of that blinking cursor. You just you start there, and I think there's lots of things to be that would be lots of space for us to have dialogue going further, and it's very exciting that it has precipitated these discussions and really precipitated collaborations across different groups in the colleges, perhaps that maybe weren't there before without necessarily the impetus of this research data management piece. It will evolve over time, and there's no question. And again, I've learned quite a bit too. The Indigenous data management piece, the data sovereignty piece, is also a very critical piece that we're looking at. And then as we learn more about that through our other tri-agency Indigenous strategy, there's things I think that we can be feeding back in and sharing with what is clearly the other really important thing is this amazing community of practice that you have. Not only the community that you have just within the college sector, which I know is incredibly strong and tight, but then also then this other specific community around research data management. So no, it's been a pleasure here to listen to that, and especially also, again, let me shout out to the Alliance and that great tools, and shout out to my colleague Alexander Thistlewood, who's been certainly active through all these and sharing resources. So thank you. Merci.
Thank you so much, Hugh. Thank you to Christina, to Susan, to Maddie, to Hugh, and again, merci beaucoup to all of our Quebec colleagues as well, to Sylvain, to Lynn, to Gregory, for sharing everything today. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Jen. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. I think this end point where we have talked about the beauty and power of collaboration and connection, along with what can happen when we come together, is really of essence. So I echo all of the thanks that have been said over the course of this session. So many people have come together, so many organizations have come together in big and small ways. Thank you for your time, your expertise for today, but also as we look back over the fall and all of these institutional RDM strategies panels that have made up this series. A fantastic group effort. I hope as we look to the future, as we look to March and the roadmaps that come after, that these collaborations can continue. So thank you again. And as we plan future events, a small reminder that events will be added to the Alliance events page and other communication tools, so we can keep an eye out. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we will see you again. Take care, everyone. Merci.
Thank you. Have a good day.